Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Evan Miyazono, the team lead for research at Protocol Labs, a company that explores the future of decentralization and examines the infrastructure limiting what people can do with the technology. This is a long, great listen, very deep on a few different topics, much deeper than I thought we were going to go, and very philosophical in some areas. So now let's go over to the conversation with Evan Miyazono. And like I said off the top, today we have Evan Miyazono from Protocol Labs. Evan, thank you very much for spending some time with us here on the Private Podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Derek.
Yeah, no problem. Especially, well, for you, or at least early in the morning. So, little bit of background. First of all, you do a lot of writing, or your writing's referenced a lot. So for anybody who's interested, just Google, or no, don't Google, DuckDuckGo or Pre-Search or even Brave Search, Evan's name. It's the if you don't know how to spell Miyazono, it's in the show notes. But yeah,
I'm also the only Evan at Protocol Labs. So if you try and
Wow.
find Evan Protocol Labs, that is sufficient. And like
Considering
most
how
of our
big the
stuff's
team
going to be
is,
on
that's impressive.
unusual, yeah. And then most of our writing ends up on like research.protocol.ai/blog or on the Protocol Labs YouTube channel. So save some searching and just start there.
Yeah. All right. So now that we got that out of the way, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into blockchain? I think I read your bio, so I think it's interesting, but I want to hear it in your own words.
Oh yeah, I have a typical spiel that I give. I went into material science in undergrad because I really wanted to wanted to help build our sci-fi utopian future. And I feel like material science was promising all sorts of things from like space elevators to like self-assembling nanomaterials at the time. This is like the mid-aughts, mid to late aughts. Okay. And at the end of that, I realized that I did not understand the fundamentals as much as I wanted to, and applied to physics and applied physics PhD programs, and ended up spending 6 years trying to build actually the last piece of hardware that we really don't have for a provably secure quantum internet. Because I was convinced that it would be really important to have robust, like provably secure key distribution when we have quantum computers that can solve discrete log. And over the course of the PhD, I like to roughly approximate, somewhat inaccurately, that we managed to get the relevant parameter from like 0.01% efficient to 0.2% efficient for like a given set of like time and size and things. And that's a huge increase, but like it needs to be 99.99% efficient or better in order for this to be an actually useful thing. So it didn't seem like the kind of thing that I was going to feel content dedicating the rest of my career to. So I left academia after finishing the PhD and was looking for specifically small teams working on weird hardware solutions to important problems. And Juan, who I'd known from college and who was consistently surrounded by some of the most interesting people I'd ever met, convinced me to drop the hardware requirement and help him out with this somewhat unconventional fundraise that they were about to do, because it was going to be weird and they were trying to do it right. And this was the 2017 Filecoin token presale. And so I jumped into that, helped out with a bunch of random things. My first day, actually, he sat me down, walked around the house where a bunch of people were working out of, collected all the papers that were in various piles, sorted them into 3 stacks, sorted the stacks and said, read these, and then read our white paper draft and give comments, and then read this set and give comments on the white paper again. And then if we don't have something else, read these also and give comments again. And I ended up making the figures for the Filecoin white paper, and that was roughly like my first month in crypto, which has been an adventure. I've consistently believed that maybe the long-term promise that people talk about isn't exactly what the long-term promise is, but there is so much impact that crypto could and probably will have, and absolutely should have, on the like trajectory of humanity and technology, in my opinion.
That's a lot of responsibility to be given in your first month working on brand new technology, looking to raise money. Obviously some work had already been put into it, and at this point, Juan has more or less legendary status, at least in some circles. And so, and here you are coming in,
Yeah.
not late to
It
the
should be
game, but
noted.
like,
I was basically just
ahead.
drawing pictures. Like I was synthesizing things and
Sure.
drawing pictures, but it was like drawing pictures that like Juan, Davidad, and Nicola would approve and say like, yes, that's right, or like, no, this is misleading. But like it sometimes I think when you're trying to communicate something that's especially very technical and like quite novel, it's good to have someone in the room who like doesn't know what they're doing, but is like generally reasonable, who can be the like the stand-in for the new learner.
Fair enough. I think, yeah, that outside perspective is definitely necessary. Like, I think we've seen all too often times where any product, or any project trying to get off the ground, when you're the one who's working at it for like 6 months or a year, or even slightly shorter period of time, like you get tunnel vision. You're like, this looks great, and you hand it off to somebody else for UX testing or something like that, and they're like, this is awful. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And that was actually part of my job in a past life of like, no, this doesn't make any sense. You're not taking the average person into account, and I don't understand how to use this thing, and I'm technical, and or at least more technical than the average person, and therefore my mom's not gonna understand how this works.
Yeah, this is a significant digression from from Protocol Labs and me to like meme space, but feels very relevant. I love to model, like I love the mental model of conversations as a traversal of an idea graph, graph in the mathematical sense, and like if you think about like, oh, to like have a conversation, you like, well, with this model you can distinguish between following a conversation in which like you get the like how each idea is connected to the last one, versus understanding a conversation where like both like every new idea is anchored into your context graph, which is the set of ideas you bring into the conversation. And when you have something like this, it's also really interesting to note that the amount of context that you can start thinking about how much context you would need to provide for each idea to make sense. And I love that I share more context with people I work with on a daily basis today than I do with myself in like 2 years. And I think that this is a fairly consistent thing where like you write an email, you look back at it 2 years later, and you have no idea what you're talking about, but like it clearly made sense to other people at the time that you were sending it to. And like when you're working on when you're deep in a thing, it's just you need to have shared context. And so like I was the one with the empty idea graph who was like, okay, I know Bitcoin and Ethereum now, and like let me make sure that you like fill in the rest of the context between these.
Right. Yeah. I've definitely run into those situations before. I'm like, I don't understand what I was writing, and I see that in my amongst my software development friends of like, I know I wrote this code, I know it works, I no longer know why it works, and so either I need to refactor it because we're working on it again, or I just need to like microservice this out so that works, and I'm gonna plug this other thing into that, and that works, then that's okay. We're gonna leave it.
Abstractions are beautiful.
But, I definitely hear that, or I've heard that often. Like I know I wrote this, I don't know how it works anymore. Okay, so you got involved with Filecoin fairly early on. You helped get the white paper out the door, and then like, what happened after that? I mean, like, I'm sure that there are lots of people who look, they know what Filecoin is, they know what IPFS is, but obviously they don't have any sort of insider view about like how that all works in the background with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can at least go into like my personal experience. Late 2017, we've just raised a bunch of money, and we are somewhat known within academia. We had like an open conversation with Dan Bonet going on. We had conversation, like Ari Jules reached out to us, and we were worried that he was going to like take up a position of like, this could never work for X, Y, and Z. And instead he reached out and was like, I think this is going to be a challenge. Do you want me to work on it with you? And like overall, people were much more receptive. I think that cryptography, particularly in 2017, was like in cryptography academia was like very receptive to like people are interested in experimenting with all these new things. And so
Yeah.
since we just raised and we weren't going to hire any professors who were experts in these fields to like leave their cushy tenured jobs and work with like this weird startup. I was tasked with starting a grant program so that we could still pay them to work on interesting problems that they found compelling, but we didn't have to worry about like trying to come up with a compelling employment offer. And so I built out I built out a grants program, advisorships, sponsorships, a bunch of things like that, and then a team to run all of those things. And for a while, we also had like a team that I affectionately refer to as special projects. And these were things that like didn't really fit under the rest of the Protocol Labs umbrella. Most of everything else that we do is related to connecting, like giving humans their like human/users of the internet more rights, more human rights in their digital interactions. And so, and like this is roughly the pitch that convinced me to join Protocol Labs. Was like we're embedding human rights in digital infrastructure, so IPFS is the like the project that Protocol Labs started with. It lets you take your data, describe it in a content addressable way, so that if you ask someone for a particular file, you can hash the thing and know that you in fact got what you asked for, which is really important when you are stepping away from centralized services, because one, you might not know where to find it, so you can just broadcast to the network, hey, did anyone have this file? And then you can also check to make sure that people aren't giving you the wrong thing. The security is roughly guaranteed by the security of the hash function that you use. And so between those two, now anyone can serve you content and you don't have to worry about someone giving you garbage or malicious data. And IPFS has, I think, really turned into like the de facto Web3 naming and addressing and sharing scheme for data that doesn't fit on the blockchain, which, let's be honest, most data doesn't.
No kidding.
And out of IPFS came libp2p, which is the modular transport library. It's surprisingly hard to get two computers to connect to each other, even in this, like more so now than it used to be, actually, if you go far enough back, because we have all of these things like NATs that are like breaking the assumptions you'd want. Yeah. And so libp2p spun out as its own project from IPFS, and a bunch of blockchains use this as their transport library. I think Polkadot and Ethereum are using it at this point. Filecoin, obviously. And then Filecoin ends up being this incentive layer on top of IPFS. With IPFS, you either share things, or you could like offline ask people to store and share things, but there's no way to incentivize or like formally request that someone else store something for you. There are services that provide this, but there isn't really a mechanism to do that. And Filecoin with a native token allows you to do this, and it also incentivizes it. Amazingly, the price to store things on Filecoin at present is subsidized to 0, given the block reward. Oh, wow. There have been questions about the sustainability of that. I'm convinced that there are so many bundled costs in a centralized storage provider. All you have to pay for with Filecoin is global consensus and proofs that your files are continuing to be stored. And both of those are decreasing as we do more research in how to develop efficient proofs, how to have scalable, shardable consensus. Pretty excited about the direction, like progress we're making in that direction generally. I think we'll have we have a shardability solution for Filecoin that launches either like Q4 this year or Q1 next year.
That's amazing.
So things like that should be really exciting.
Yeah.
And then like if the cost of that gets low enough, then your storage can, in an unsubsidized future, still be cheaper than these centralized options. And I'm pretty sure that it's like there are many applications for which decentralized storage is the goal that we should like the only logical solution compared to like cloud or fog storage. And I can go into those later
Yeah.
too.
This was not, I don't think we weren't planning to talk about this, but I just saw an article recently about the fact that Taiwan has now deployed all sorts of data to IPFS because they are, context for anybody who doesn't know, the Chinese Communist Party vowed when they took over mainland China from what is now this government in exile in Taiwan, depending on your perspective, to reunite Taiwan with China within, I think, 40 or 50 years of the revolution, if you want to call it that, at the time. And so that's coming up. That's coming up in like the next 5 to 10 years, somewhere around there. So there's been a lot of pressure from China against Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi's visit recently escalated that, and I think gave China a good excuse to escalate their various measures. And thanks to Cloudflare and some other partners, Taiwan has been able to reduce the impact that a lot of the cyber attacks have had. And now they've actually turned to IPFS. I don't know if it's Filecoin or just IPFS at the free layer or the decentralized layer. But Audrey Tang, who previous Orchid Private Summit, virtual summit guest, said recently to the Decrypt or the Block that they'd started using IPFS for like just about everything that they can. And it's helping thwart China's petabytes and petabytes per day attacks again, just trying to basically make services unusable in Taiwan. And so there's, when people ask like, well, what is this good for? Well, there's a really good use case for it. This decentralized, ideally, guaranteed naming and naming, addressing, locating, and retrieval protocol is literally, helping Taiwan's government, continue to do business in the face of ridiculous amounts of cyber attacks every day that Cloudflare is helping thwart, and now IPFS is helping thwart because there are so many nodes available, and you can actually ensure that unless the entire internet, gets severed from Taiwan, you can actually still go out and get that that data. So that was literally like last week. I think I was in Portugal at the time when I was reading it, and yeah, so that's
great.
So it's like that sort of thing. Like there's your research and the rest of the team literally being used in a very important context, besides Bored Apes and CryptoPunks. Nothing against them. I don't own one, and so I'm not gonna talk positively or negatively about any NFT collection. But that's great that you can store PNGs, JPEGs, MOVs, MP4s, etc. For multimedia and art. But this whole thing with Taiwan and China is a whole other level, and the IPFS protocol has proven to be incredibly useful there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like really interesting things connected to that. I don't think I knew about that to that level of detail. I'm a huge fan of Audrey Tang and the digital democracy stuff happening in Taiwan. But we New York State has committed to putting a bunch of data on Filecoin that they want to have archived and long-term available for the public. There are like less exciting, but still, or like less maybe I don't know. I don't want to call them less exciting or less compelling. They're like less like urgent or like
yes, urgent's a good word.
Like yeah, and then there are also a bunch of things where like we're asked not to highlight that IPFS is used in these things because centralized governments might be annoyed. But like there are a few things out there where if you like go digging, you can find things, some of which you might even have used, that are like amazing resources that are strongly aligned with like making the world's knowledge free and like easily exchangeable, that run on IPFS. sometimes even like so deep in the background that you could use the thing and never know. But like things like that, things related to like elections or Wikipedia in various places where those might be considered a threat to centralized governments, and like it's really fun and motivating to hear about those instances and like see the uses where like decentralization and peer-to-peer stuff is like absolutely shining through and showing its benefits.
Uh, a quick aside here, and then we can get back to the questions we had planned to ask you. Maybe the whole thing with Ethereum and the number of nodes, OFAC sanctions against Tornado Cash or Tornado Cash smart contracts, I guess, and some of the recipients of money through uh, um, Tornado Cash because of the blacklists built into USDC. Specifically, in this case, USDT has one as well, although they've said that they're going to have to be asked specifically to make changes. They're not just going to go ahead and do it proactively. But anyway, a lot of talk came up about how many Ethereum 1 and Ethereum POS consensus nodes are running at centralized cloud computing providers, which I've always seen to be as a problem going forward. But it's obviously been massively highlighted recently. Amazon EC2, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, etc. Do you have any maybe opinions on what's going on there, or insight about how the industry as a whole could continue to make sure that we actually decentralize this? Because at this point, while it might be geographically distributed or decentralized, obviously from a centralized provider perspective, it's really not. But on the other hand, running a big tower machine at home that needs to be cooled and all that could be prohibitively expensive for a lot of people who want to participate in consensus and in Filecoin's case, actually storing data and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts. I think that I see the trajectory as improving in this particular dimension of decentralization, which I generally consider to be like a highly multidimensional thing. Like you can be very decentralized in all ways but one, and then be centralized in the one way that matters. And so it's important to like note that like I hate when people like project things into a dichotomy of decentralized or not. But I think that the best future is one in which it is very like there are very low burdens to participating on the like maintenance and growth side of these blockchain networks. I think that I know that we want to improve the like user experience for being a storage provider on Filecoin, and I would generally say that like this taps into part of what gets me really annoyed when people hate on blockchains for the energy intensiveness, because everyone in blockchain has a strong incentive to reduce the energy usage. Like it's if we could replace everything that uses a lot of energy with something that used less energy and it was just like a magical black box, I think the only people who wouldn't immediately jump on that are the people who don't trust the black box because they don't understand it and they value that more. But like it's not like car companies that are holding back improvements to their engine efficiency because so they can like slowly trickle out the technology. Like no, blockchains want to get this get all of this fixed to get more people in. It's strongly positive sum trying to get if you can get more providers, more verifiers, etc. I think that everyone agrees that the system becomes better, and I don't consider it a failure that you have like mining pools that reject new people because they don't want to have more than 51% of the power. I think that is actually that is a demonstration that the governance layer is working, and that's important because if the governance layer doesn't work, if the human layer 0 fails, then like everything comes crashing down. Like money, like the value of money, fiat or token, is completely intersubjective. It only is true because people believe it's true. The power of nation states, the legitimacy of markets, and like all of these are things that we've like kind of seen undermined because people recognize like, oh hey, this thing is like a lot of just collective belief, like hope and a prayer. We're all going along with this being true, and that's what's making it true. And I think that like
I mean, that's
this
the
is
whole
causing
fiat system right now.
yeah. Yeah, but like it's also true of the legitimacy of the stock market, and I think we saw that with
Sure.
like although like Wall Street bets changing what it meant for something to be valuable. I don't think that they were like screwing with the stock market. They were fundamentally changing our society's like generalized understanding and metric for what value was. And
Yeah.
like if you don't expect that to keep happening, if you don't like, then I think you're missing something. I've become completely convinced that like there are few, if any, big problems facing humanity that aren't at like some level fundamentally governance problems, when like governance in the like collective intelligence, like intelligent cooperation type sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought it was really funny. This quick aside took a lot longer than I was planning. I just thought it was really funny that Wall Street bets basically just started playing the exact same game that hedge fund managers and everybody else on Wall Street, Bay Street,
Yeah,
the FTSE, etc. That they play all day and literally get paid to play, and regulators and people on MSNBC, or not MSNBC, CNBC, and report on BNN and whatever, like we're all upset, like up in arms, like, oh, they're messing with the system. No, they were playing the same game. They were just doing it in reverse. Like you guys are, speculating on whether this company's going to go down, literally betting on its demise. And instead, these other folks thought, no, GameStop should be here, or like it's a really good opportunity to mess with all these hedge fund managers and everything else. So we're going to take advantage of the situation. And I thought it was hilarious.
it was just different context.
It was a
Same
completely
game,
different
new
context.
and it completely overturns what was happening before.
And I'm sure there are lots of other companies where that's doable. I don't know of any massively coordinated attempts to do that sort of thing since then, but I think it's incredibly, it's almost superhero villain level stuff to me, to literally bet on a company going under and make potentially millions at it. Like it's so.
You
It
think that's
completely
bad? You
perverts.
should read more about the story of the Greek currency default.
I know. It just like it completely perverts
if
the
it's bad
the
to do it for a
incentives.
company, it's even worse to do it for a country. Yeah. But and like the capitalist argument is that you need a way to propagate negative signals in these systems, and I think that like the strength of those negative signals has just gone too far. I'm like a huge fan of Chesterton's fence, where it's like, unless you can argue for for the existence of a thing, you probably shouldn't argue for the removal of such a thing. But like in this respect, I've been like generally thinking about like governance tooling, things like that. You'd mentioned that like you weren't sure where there were other like games being played to like completely radically shift incentive mechanisms. My team has started a conference called Funding the Commons, where we want to start bringing together mechanism designers, game theoreticians, and then people from Web3 who are actually putting these kinds of things into practice. I think that like the success of quadratic voting on Gitcoin shows that like Web3 is willing to, like DWeb is really willing to put experimental governance tools into practice in the same way that we are with cryptography. And I think we could really bring that field up to kind of like the revolutionary pace that we've seen cryptography achieve in the last 5 or so years. And like I'm really hoping that we can start seeing people play with new governance tooling and like get kids really excited about like ranked choice voting and liquid democracy and like weird
Yeah.
shit like this has been around for a while. Like there are even elements of futarchy that I'm like a huge fan of. Not the whole thing generally. Personally, I'm like bearish on prediction markets. But like I think that the idea of separating what should we do with like the very like democracy is really good at getting people to agree like we should do this thing, this is the world, the way we want the world to be, really
Right.
seems to be bad at, or getting worse at this is the path to getting there. And I
Yeah.
think that, but I think the separation is really valuable. And if you can get people to play with this in games, in their online communities, then they will be much more willing to take this to their ballot box in some election locally or like city, state, national, or I guess like city, province, national,
Yeah.
for our non-US viewers, and or some of our non-US viewers. But
Yeah. There are states in
I
other
think that
countries, not just the US.
I think we should, I think we should see propagation of like novel governance tooling from DWeb out in the same way that we've
Yeah.
been seeing like you have like robust public key infrastructure that might be showing up on some of these more centralized platforms that you can leverage because people just, I guess, good example would be like ENS support within Twitter. Like at some point, it would be great if we had like robust public key infrastructure for all social networks because like if not already, very soon, we should expect that most things that you find on the internet are not just untrue, but or not just misinformation, but disinformation. Like
Yeah.
the cost of generation of disinformation is just going to hit like roughly zero at some point in probably like the next 4 to 8 years, and that's gonna be interesting.
Fueled by the recent, or at least increasingly fueled. This is just adding more kiln to the fire. With Russia doing war games with China, India, Syria, Nicaragua, with North Korea pledging, we've got 100,000 people who can help you out in Ukraine over there. You just let us know. And just like, it feels like 1937 ish, kind of all over again. It's been a while. Unfortunately, I think we're due for just one crazy ass war again. And I mean, I've seen it coming for a long time, and I just like all of a sudden things just seem to be accelerating, and not looking forward to it. But maybe it'll help
I
drive some of the D-Web, Web3 tech forward in previously unforeseen ways, and hopefully potentially bear out in the end because we need it. I don't know. I'm trying to find the silver lining here. I don't know if there is
I
one, but I guess
yeah.
we'll find out.
I I expect that it will push toward more like decentralized, self-sovereign, etc. technology because I think that the analog of the Manhattan Project is going to be like human level machine and like human level AI and
Yeah.
ML models, and like those aren't geo constrained. Those are going to
No, they're
be
not.
a problem for everyone connected to the internet when they show up, and so I think we'll see a lot of. I hope we see a lot of tooling. I think that there's also like some social pressure towards funding or celebrating people who are working on like one of my particular favorites was like this idea that we're spending too much time trying to get a machine to do what a person wants and not getting machines to try and figure out how to solve a problem for many people who are in disagreement. And if we
Right.
could solve this not quite, or like not the one principal, one actor problem, but the multi-principal, one actor problem, I think that would be like really exciting to see if people have like money or prestige networks you could deploy against this problem, and you're aligned with like the fact that we need to push on AI to like the AI community to make progress in this direction, then reach out. I do know people, like I'm stealing this idea from someone who is much more knowledgeable than I am, who has like extra ideas and thoughts and context on like how this could work, and did not intend to plug that here, but it feels sufficiently important.
Yeah, well, I know, and I think it does. But like, what's an example of this one actor, multi-party? I think you said problem like that
Oh,
that potentially this could solve.
yeah, I mean, like the idea that you could have like conflict mediation or like a diplomacy bot. Like it would be great if you could have some kind of data set or test to see if like we could train a machine to like come up with better compromises than what humans do. I don't think that that's like
Okay.
outside the bounds of it. It would be beyond the cutting edge, but it's close enough that it's well within the realm of the adjacent possible. And the more we have like both latent and tacit knowledge within humans, but also like tooling within machines, the more likely it is that we can have like actually useful conflict mediation or conflict
Right,
avoidance within like human level AI system or human level intelligence AI systems when they eventually show up.
I guess then the problem would be, as it always is, coming back to the humans of like, okay, now are you willing to accept this? Because I think we both know some people who are like, no, it's literally my way or the highway at this point, and I don't care what your fancy AI says we should do. But in
That's part of
I
negotiating though. Like
yes,
negotiation like is not developing the compromise, it's getting people to agree on the compromise. And I think
yeah,
that
yeah.
like humans can do this, we can get a computer to do this. And the question is just like, are the governance tooling, are the incentives right to get people to want to solve this problem robustly? Because I think that we could solve this problem, but like for whatever reason, it's not considered like interesting or prestigious academically enough, or like valuable enough, or like profitable enough. So
I think avoiding WW3 would be incredibly profitable from a humanity perspective, and would certainly lend some prestige to whoever does it. But I don't know if there's time for that now.
it's mapping the problem onto the like at that point it's can you map the problem to the outcome of like avoiding global
Yeah,
conflict.
yeah. So I'm gonna try and wrap this back around. Like, what role do you see protocol labs playing in all this? Like, you have amazing technology, fantastic researchers. I've met some of the folks on the team, core, hackathon, public facing folks. Like, where do you see the company, the organization, helping push things forward?
My view is going to be biased by the fact that I sit on the side that works on the stuff that is farthest from like, well, I guess maybe less true now, but many of the things that I spend my time on are the things that are very far from today. I tend to have like I overlap with the longest timescales that Juan thinks about, and that includes like what should we prepare now for a future in which like AR VR is as omnipresent as smartphones, BCI is as omnipresent as smartphones, or like AI is as omnipresent as like cloud computing kind of thing. And like a lot of these things work a lot better, like feel a lot less scary if you have a lot of like self-sovereign data. I'm convinced that like the metaverse is not some product. The metaverse is actually going to be an infrastructure layer where we've pulled the pieces that are most compelling out of like Gather.town or like Google Docs or like Figma. And this like the website is not content. The website is a venue for you to generate your own content. I think that once that gets embedded into the protocol layers of the internet, then we have a metaverse. And obviously that should be like highly decentralized, very peer-to-peer, storage should be local, especially if it's AR, because if I have an AR version of my house, then that data should be in my house so that I have low latency to it. And like you have this very clear mapping of like what the experience is to where it's stored. BCI, a lot of the signal analysis is like, there's too much data here to interpret every single channel as like something that's coming out. You need some kind of interpretation layer. Usually takes the form of some machine learning algorithm. That should absolutely be something that is like stored locally, backed up via IPFS to your other nodes, encrypted and backed up on Filecoin, because I absolutely don't want that running on some centralized cloud where like they can turn the model over to the government when I go through some like checkpoint, and they can ask me if I've been having thoughts about revolution or like think that I'm unhappy with the way politics is going. So like I think that the future of the internet is very the good future of the internet is very self-sovereign. Obviously potential for bad futures, but like I firmly believe that we have the capacity to avoid or fix a lot of these, if not all of these problems. And I think that we'll just continue embedding like freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom to compute with whoever you want privately, moving those from like inalienable rights in the offline space into our digital interactions. And I hope, I know that Protocol Labs will continue pushing on those, and I hope we make increasing like improvements in the velocity with which we can implement those changes.
Yeah. You might not be able to answer this question, but it's something I thought about half an hour ago, was about the actual, like in general, the scalability of such a protocol, right? Whether it's libp2p itself or IPFS, like in the addressing and the locating and all that, like it sounds like something that at some point it wouldn't break, but it would be very strained with a lot of messaging essentially saying like, hey, where do I find this thing? Now, DNS does that really well right now for the current internet. But there are also tiers to DNS, right? Where like if my ISP's local DNS servers know where to find something, that's not going all the way up to the root 53 or whatever it is servers that are up there. You know, like it's like, is that something that you think has already been solved, or is that part of the research that you guys are doing just to make sure that, you know, billions of requests per second basically can actually be handled by IPFS as a core layer?
Yeah, this is something that we're absolutely, I would absolutely consider this to be an unsolved problem. I think we have at least like one or two open problems and grants open to like working on like more scalable and more private retrieval. Grants.protocol.ai. Come look at our open problems.
If you are so inclined.
Yeah. In addition to that, I'll be honest, like most of the proposals are people who have like, or come from people who have like many, many years of like networking experience and or like cryptography experience. And so we like hold these applications to a very high standard, but we get really good proposals, and we spend time pulling in people who like may be skeptical of Web3 and have enough relevant background. I think that there's an element that is like, yes, it's true that like it's unclear if peer-to-peer scales. You have I'm blanking on, I think Metcalfe's
like there are
law.
like I know that there are
where, like, the
blockchains
value
out there
goes to the
where
square.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to add something in while you were thinking. Like I know that there are blockchains out there where the more peers there are, actually the slower it gets, which, you know, reduces then the opportunities for general people or for additional well-meaning organizations to actually jump in, provide, you know, an additional, whether it's proof of stake or proof of work or whatever, POA, proof of authority, you know, additional decentralization. You want that, but there are a lot of situations where the more you add, actually the worse it gets, the slower it gets. So anyway, I was just trying to add some context, and then there's obviously a delay here.
I was referencing Metcalfe's law, where the value of a network goes as roughly the square of the number of participants. And I think that this is like something like it is very like in a decentralized system, you should expect the communication overhead to roughly go the same because you have pairwise communication. There are benefits to some types of centralization, and I would be skeptical of anyone who disagreed with that. There are, but on the other hand, I think it's really interesting and valuable to note that taking like in many instances with a decentralized system, you don't actually need to have immediate connection and communication channels open with everyone in the network. Even if I feel like even the things that I Google are things that I'm only going to like jump from there, like, or DuckDuckGo, the things that I like find there, I'm going to jump from that to something like Wikipedia that I trust as a good source of information, or like a government website. And like I'm not going to just pull information from anywhere. I'm probably going to get it from some like source that exists in my sphere already. And the question becomes, how do you balance the like efficiency and very human side of that, like Dunbar's number-esque network size, which is, I think, scalable because like humanity is scalable. Like we won't all just like disappear if we reach over a certain number of humans. How do you merge that against the creation and formation of echo chambers? How do you have good idea cross-pollination? How do you get the exchange of people and ideas that you want? And I think they're like weird, fun epidemiology studies where like you have sets of civilizations that are more or less resistant to pandemics based on how much exchange there is. And there's actually like if you have like, there's some like peak level of productivity where like you don't want it too connected because then you have too much like susceptibility, but too much transmission. But if you have it too disconnected, then you have like too much divergence and like homogeneity between systems, and you don't benefit from the diversity. So I think that this is like a fundamental sociological problem. I don't think this is a network problem that necessarily needs to be solved. And the question becomes like, how do we get the network problems to more closely mirror sociological solutions?
Okay. We've come up to time, but if you have a few more minutes, I've got two more questions I want to ask you, and then we can wrap up. Cool. I'd really like to get your thoughts on two things. First of all, what does you kind of already touched on this, but I'm hoping you can go a little bit deeper. What the decentralized future looks like to you, maybe 5-10 years out, everything goes well, maybe we are in, what's that term? Something punk, not cyberpunk, the other one. Solar punk. Some sort of solar punk future, Star Trek-esque perhaps, and then some of the other things Protocol Labs is working on over the next year or so as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to cover both of those. I think that I want to see DAOs show that you can have scalable community self-governance, or like community self-governance, community in the generalized sense, at any scale. I want to see like DAOs I love that DAOs are like this computer scientist abstraction layer on like people coming together and doing a thing. Like all the relevant terms are so loaded. It's really problematic. Like collective action, like that like immediately draws up unions, but like that's what DAOs are. Like collective intelligence is like not action oriented enough,
right,
in my opinion. But I don't know, maybe like collective, and I'm not going to coin a term here, but like I think that we'll have a like broad diversity of like how people solve problems, at what scales they solve problems for themselves. I think there will be novel mechanisms where like we have groups that develop. I love the idea that these groups can set up their own monetary policies. I tend to be very bullish on some ideas from MMT, and that being modern monetary theory. And I think that it's potentially very powerful for groups to come together and agree that they like a thing and they want to foster its growth by like capturing and recycling some of the value from it into the growth. We've seen this with crypto networks, but we can see this with other groups. I do think that it feels like there's a cultural divergence between people who are pushing for a network state and people who are pushing for more digital democracy. But I feel like the end state, like the end goal that both of these groups are working towards, is kind of the same. The question is whether you're replacing or upgrading existing institutions. And I really hope that we have like what comes down to like more participatory and better mechanisms to get groups of people to understand what they want, to like aggregate and prioritize those wants, and then act against them. And I see that as kind of like the fundamental extension of crypto being like communities coming together to describe what they value. I obviously would love to see more tooling around self-sovereignty, more robust knowledge around and leverage of public key infrastructure. And then I also think that there'll be a lot of like technological things where like I can go from relying on centralized service providers to more decentralized service providers. I would love to see some like Orchid libp2p like collaboration where like I stop needing even any kind of like cell phone plan or internet plan. I'm just like paying the person who connects me to the rest of the people. And like I think that it's like so many things that we have out there is just limited by our imagination to to come up with what a better solution looks like and how to get there. I would plug the Future of Life Institute's world building competition as like a great place to look for inspiration of like what a good future there, particularly with AI would look like, or with AGI would look like. But like the more you can think about what the world you want looks like, the more likely it is that you'll actually go out and try and build it. And then the other question you had was projects Protocol Labs will be working on. We have things within the network that are like significant improvements to IPFS, Filecoin, and libp2p. We announced a rather large fund-like entity that will be promoting the design and construction of new implementations of IPFS. Picture like an enterprise IPFS that's the analog of like Red Hat. We have private retrieval and initiatives around private retrieval and more efficient retrieval within Filecoin, and I guess more efficient retrieval within Filecoin, more private retrieval within IPFS and libp2p, and I find those to be really compelling. Launching the Filecoin virtual machine and scalability, like sharding on Filecoin. I'm very excited about all of those things. The things I'm personally working on are, we have this project called Discourse Graphs, and the idea is that you could take, this started with Professor Joel Chan at University of Maryland, who said like, oh yeah, I use this schema to summarize papers, and when a new grad student joins my group, I don't give them a stack of papers, I give them access to my notes on these papers. And I was like, that's the future of research. And that's cool. We funded him to get a developer, David Vargas, to start building out tooling for this. Matt Akamatsu is pushing this into more areas of science. I think that this could be the future of research collaborations, and I want to live in that future. So I'm pushing on that. We're trying to find people who can incentivize more adoption. So if you happen to control a large amount of research funding, or a high reputation journal, or a high reputation conference, reach out to me, and we'll try and find a like really positive sum outcome or project we could undertake with Discourse Graphs. And then we also have a project related to impact certificates. I have like a really, I have an application that I think, I have a problem that impact certificates solves. There are lots of people who talk about impact certificates as like, there is this tool that could like incentivize positive externalities. Wouldn't it be great? And I absolutely agree. It would be great. But I also have a problem And impact certificates solve this problem. And I feel like we're already at time, and I don't want to go like deeply into this. Maybe I'll just drop that I will be speaking about this at DevCon in Bogota, and so you can go and
Okay.
find my talk there in a few weeks.
I think that's great, and that's probably a good way to leave it so that you don't front run yourself. And
Thank you.
I mean, I think we'll have lots of reasons to tune into the talks from Bogota. I still need to catch up on ECC, but uh, yeah, I think this is why I'm bearish. I'm bearish on humanity short term, just because we still have a lot of legacy, what I will call pricks, who think that they should be in charge, and they should be in charge of large swaths of people and resources and their attitudes ultimately. But I'm long term bullish on humanity because Orchid has been promoting decentralized VPN for several years now. That's actually starting to change, like literally right about now, towards we have this decentralized protocol that anybody can build a two-sided marketplace on, and render those services. So your hope of, like, I don't know, your modem running Orchid basically and connecting you to multiple other, tiers, and eventually back to the internet where you want to be, and to libpdp and IPFS so you can get the data you're looking for. That's the transition now, is more towards that, and VPN is just one example of how that marketplace, that bandwidth marketplace works. So anyway, between Orchid, Gitcoin, you mentioned earlier, and Gitcoin grants and the rounds and the amount of funding that comes out of it towards stuff that in most cases is really, really worthwhile, in, obviously speaking from my own opinion. IPFS, the work that Protocol Labs is doing, the graph as well, and the vision, like the graph as a network exists today, but when you listen to Yaniv, and Brandon and Giannis talk about this very solar punk, humanity at its best future that they have in mind, that the graph helps enable, I just think there are way too many good, smart people who realize all the crap we've been doing for the last few hundred years, it's kind of worked in some ways, but it can be way better. And through decentralized computing, cryptography, etc., where we actually have the tools now and the ability, and in a lot of cases the funding, to start doing that, because we've got this incentive layer that we can apply to it, and it incentivizes good behavior. And for the people who don't want to engage in good behavior, they actually get their money taken away from them. Like, all these things that you think should happen in society can actually happen now. And I think that's what a lot of my friends and family don't understand. But it's not generally something we talk about at Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's more like, what do you do again? Oh, and you host a podcast? Oh, okay. What's the podcast? And so hopefully my cousin Helder will listen to it with this one, because he was like, "Ooh, you have a podcast. I want to listen to that." He'll listen to this one in a few weeks and be like, "That's what Derek's working on. Good stuff." Anyway, Evan, if people, you dropped the blog, the blog URL earlier. Do you have any social media accounts people should tune in into, or should they just go check out Protocol Labs's website, socials, etc.?
I think that my Twitter is probably the easiest place to follow things. If I do a thing, it will often get indexed there, and you get all of my like completely weird hot takes on various things. Yeah, and I'm at Miyazono. So you'll have to pull Miyazono from the spelling Miyazono
Okay.
from the podcast title, unless you you have like a
if you have
good knowledge of Japanese spelling.
I was gonna say, if you have any general knowledge of Japanese, names and words, you'll probably be fine. But yes, it's
Yeah. Or if you
definitely
speak
in the
Spanish,
show notes.
Miyazono. It's
That's
yeah.
true. Me, yeah,
It's like
yeah. That works
it's
really
pretty
well.
phonetic.
Actually.
Yeah. Anyway, uh, yeah, I also am responsive on like all of the platforms, and like very receptive to conversations. Come track me down wherever. My email is evan@protocol.ai, and I will probably get to you if you email me. I'll be honest. If you like catch me on Twitter, that's probably slightly more high fidelity. But And like most of the things that I'm talking about are not things that I'm spending all of my time doing because I talked about a lot of things. So
Yeah.
please don't be offended if I route you to someone who is more relevant and more interesting with respect to any one of these projects than I am. But
No,
yeah, look forward
I
to
think that makes sense.
follow us.
Great. So Evan, thanks you very much for your time and going a little bit over. And hopefully everybody listening, you really enjoyed this conversation that went way deeper and way to the side than I was anticipating. But I think it's a worthwhile
Very
listen.
fun.
So until next time, stay free.